Well, I thought this movie actually impressed me, and I'll make it clear that that isn't a secret. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about a newer theatrical release, Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore. Before we begin, let me know in the comments what your thoughts on this movie were, if you already saw it, or if you are planning on seeing it, and make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these reviews, as it helps me out immensely by getting my content out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with more movie-related content like fantasy movie reviews on a near-daily basis. But let's not waste any more time and let's talk about Fantastic Beasts 3. This sees Jude Law return as Albus Dumbledore, who assigns Newt Scamander, played again by Eddie Redmayne, and his allies with a mission related to the rising power of Grindelwald, played by Mads Mikkelsen. David Yates returns to direct his 7th film overall in the Wizarding World franchise, and to see Steve Kloves, who wrote the screenplays to all but one of the Harry Potter movies, return to co-write the screenplay for this. And it was released theatrically earlier this month, being one of the films that saw numerous delays due to the pandemic. Now, I was a big Harry Potter fan growing up. I read all the books multiple times, I'd read up on all the little minute details in between books, and at one point I was really invested in just about everything with this universe. And I also enjoyed all the movies, most of which I never thought were quite on par with the books, but were all either still good or great to me. With Fantastic Beasts though, these have so far been a little hit and miss for me. I liked the first one enough, though definitely not on the same level as any of the Harry Potter movies. The second one though, I thought was just okay, and I found it to be a major step down from the first movie, which seems to be the general consensus among audiences for the most part. And considering we're supposed to have 5 of these movies, which according to recent reports might no longer be the case, but we'll see, it did dampen my excitement for any future installments of this franchise if it stumbled that early on. I felt the magic, no pun intended, might no longer be there. So consider me surprised when I actually walked out of this movie enjoying it quite a bit. It's definitely an improvement over Crimes of Grindelwald, and it might just even be better than the first Fantastic Beasts. While it's not going to gain any new converts to the Wizarding World and it's not a perfect film, I think bringing back Steve Kloves, who obviously had a firm grasp on what makes the Wizarding World so compelling, was a great move that helped give some focus back to the series. I'd say this is the highest stakes of all the Fantastic Beasts films. The first film was definitely more whimsical in nature, while the second definitely pivoted towards something darker, but felt more like it was just set up for future installments and nothing more. This one though feels like we're actually building up the conflict with Grindelwald, and it felt like it was building towards some big showdown with the character. And it's a lot clearer from the get-go that this will be our main focus, which made for a much more gripping narrative. Though on that same note, it does still suffer slightly from an issue that was prevalent in the second movie in particular, where there was this divide. While Newt Scamander was a fitting protagonist for the first film, given it was mostly about these charming little adventures with the darker stuff in the background, he never felt like the character to have as the face of this series. Like, he didn't have as quite of a compelling background to him as Harry Potter. And with the pivot to considerably darker material, he begins to feel more and more out of place, just because of how tonally different his adventures are compared to the Grindelwald stuff. And even with him, along with Dan Fogler as Jacob Kowalski, now being actively recruited to actually take Grindelwald down, I think it works much better this time around, but there were times he still felt like he didn't completely fit in, especially as he doesn't get nearly as much of the compelling material this time around. Now, I like Eddie Redmayne, I think he plays the part well, but despite still being one of the major faces of the franchise, he just felt more like a cog in this machine rather than the most intriguing character to follow, and he's supposed to be our main protagonist. So there was a bit of that tonal imbalance every once in a while whenever we focus on him. It's just, since he has much more of an active involvement in the Grindelwald stuff this time around, it's nowhere near as prevalent as the previous movie. But Jude Law as Dumbledore, as well as Mads Mikkelsen as Grindelwald, were 2 of the biggest standouts for me here. One of the biggest storylines in this film is how the reason Dumbledore needs to recruit Newt and all these other wizards is due to this blood pact he has with Grindelwald made when they were younger, as they were in love at one point. So anytime he even thinks of breaking that pact and fight Grindelwald, he begins to feel physical pain. And Jude Law does a great job with that material, for the most part at least, because there is a moment in the very beginning where we see Dumbledore and Grindelwald speaking to one another, and they discuss their former relationship, where I didn't quite buy the tension of two people who were once close and in love necessarily. It definitely felt like two enemies who want to stop one another, so the scene didn't feel like it was a total dud, but as far as this relationship is involved, it felt a bit like it was only grazed upon. Though as Dumbledore gets Newt and these other wizards involved and gets more into detail as far as what's at stake, I thought Law did a great job with all that material. And as for Mads Mikkelsen, who replaced Johnny Depp from the previous movies, I thought he was a great addition to the cast. Now, I like Johnny Depp in general. He wasn't bad as Grindelwald in the second movie, and the little we saw him in the first, but he did seem maybe just a touch out of place at times, if I had to be perfectly honest. Like, he was brought in because he was a big name and he's been attached to all these other fantasy franchises before, but this just didn't seem totally right for him, as much as he was trying. Now, Mikkelsen, who's usually great in these sinister, villainous roles, I think is a much better fit to play the calculating, manipulative Grindelwald. There's a lot more simmering tension whenever we see him on screen, like just from the very look he has on his face. He gives off a clear air of intimidation, so I think that makes him feel like a much more credible threat. And because of this, I bought into a lot of the suspense that loomed over much of the film as characters discussed him and the danger he posed. And with Grindelwald's storyline comes a new element to the wizarding world that I never thought would work quite as well here, and that's the political thriller. Because the way he's looking to seize control is through manipulating this election so that he can become the head of the wizarding community known as the Supreme Mugwump, and that way he can better enact his agenda with no pushback. So this election is the big event that the film's building towards, with Dumbledore breaking off Newt, Jacob, and others into teams to get closer to Grindelwald and his inner circle. And the other two major players are Newt's brother Theseus, played by Callum Turner, and a teacher named Lolly, played by Jessica Williams, the latter of whom was another big scene stealer, along with Vogler, with the two being paired up for much of the runtime. And as I said, this political aspect was a nice touch, as I think with both Harry Potter and Fantastic Beasts, each subsequent installment got darker, so it fits in nicely with the tone that's being established. And while that's not a subgenre that I generally always gravitate towards, I think with the dialogue-heavy nature of both the political thriller as well as the wizarding world, due to all the lore that needs to be established, it blended together well, and it allowed this film to move along at a mostly brisk pace. Now, there are times it definitely feels a bit too bogged down, primarily towards the middle, as maybe it gets a bit too exposition heavy for my liking. Like I said, with the wizarding world, because there's so much ground that needs to be covered regarding who's who and what certain things mean, it does cause the film to have to explain a lot to us, and there are times it gets so caught up in that I think it slows things down a bit, and I think it could have cut out at least a good 10 to 15 minutes or so. But for the most part, this was a pretty engaging film, and it's one that, despite its dark tone, knew how to have a sense of fun. We get some nice moments of comedic relief to break some of the tension, especially as I mentioned earlier in the scenes with Dan Fogler and Jessica Williams. And when it goes all in on the big wizarding battles, those work nicely as well, and some moments felt considerably more violent than what we're used to in this series, where it would be something akin to the later Harry Potter films. It wasn't anything totally jarring, like it wouldn't be inappropriate for younger audiences who still love the franchise, but there were a few moments during the action scenes that, for these films, actually kind of impressed me, I gotta say. Though with all that, I am a little curious how they're going to go ahead with the rest of the series, if they are going to continue on with it. As I said earlier, this was initially meant to be 5 movies, and even when that was first announced, I wasn't the biggest fan of that. I have a little more confidence in it now, considering how much more focused this was in comparison to its predecessor. Though at the same time, the way this film ends, without getting into spoilers, there are quite a number of storylines that were wrapped up in a way that if they were to just stop making any of these movies, it would actually be on a somewhat satisfying note. And I know Warner Brothers has now said they're waiting to see how this movie does before greenlighting the final 2 films, and while it technically does leave the door open for more, I am curious what direction they'd go in, given how things end for a number of the storylines here. Like, would it be a clean slate, or would they bring back as many familiar faces as they can? I don't know. Personally, I think an almost clean slate with just Dumbledore and Grindelwald returning might do these last couple of movies some good. Like I said, there were still elements that carried over from the previous movies that seemed a touch out of place, so I think just having an exclusive focus on the Dumbledore-Grindelwald tension might put these last 2 movies in a really good spot. But hey, I guess only time will tell, should they even move forward with these. Fantastic Beasts 3 is a major improvement over its predecessor, and it recaptures some of the charm that makes the Wizarding World such an enjoyable place to be. While it goes on for maybe just a bit too long, and there are still some elements about the previous two movies that don't work quite as well making their way into this, it's still a lot of fun, with its mixture of big wizarding battles along with its political thriller aspect that made it quite gripping. While it's not going to convert any new fans to this franchise, if you've been invested in the Wizarding World all this time, you certainly don't want to miss this. Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore gets a 7 out of 10. So let me know, did you see Fantastic Beasts 3, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did you like it more than the other two movies? Did you like it more than any of the other Harry Potter movies? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching everyone, and keep having fun with film.